Hoy vimos a un presidente en cadena nacional jugando a médico sin bata y sin idea, por supuesto. Donald Trump anunció la gran noticia de salud y lo único grande fue el bochorno. No pudo pronunciar el nombre del fármaco del que hablaba, encadenó ocurrencias y sus asistentes tuvieron que meterse a corregirlo como si fuera un karaoke político. Vamos a desmontar con calma y con bisturí cómo se fabrica esta desinformación desde el atril presidencial. Recordatorio rápido, si les gusta este tipo de videos, nos ayudaría mucho que le dieran al botón de me gusta, se suscribiera si aún no lo han hecho y comenten su opinión. El 98% de quienes nos ven todavía no están suscritos y juntos podemos hacer crecer a esta comunidad. Ahora sí, pasemos con la noticia.
I think it's very bad. They're pumping, it looks like they're pumping into a horse. You have a little child, little fragile child, and you get a vat of 80 different vaccines, I guess, 80 different blends, and they pump it in. So ideally, a woman won't take Tylenol. And on the vaccines, it would be good instead of one visit where they pump the baby, load it up with stuff, you'll do it over a period of 4 times or 5 times. I've been so into this issue for so many years just because I couldn't understand how a thing like this could happen.
Confundir convicción con conocimiento. El presidente no presenta datos, presenta imágenes grotescas para asustar. Eso no es un liderazgo sanitario, es espectáculo. Y el punchline de su show fue un anuncio improvisado sobre el analgésico más común en el hogar, el paracetamol o acetaminofén. Vamos a ese tramo para entender el calibre del despropósito.
Known as Tylenol during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary. That are so bad and they don't take them anymore. But for some reason, with this, they keep taking it. Don't take Tylenol. There's no downside. Don't take it. You'll be uncomfortable. It won't be as easy, maybe. But don't take it. If you're pregnant, don't take Tylenol. And don't give it to the baby after the baby is born.
Órdenes tajantes sin guía médica real. En salud pública, las frases lapidarias cuestan caro. Y luego llegó la joya, el intento de leer en voz alta el nombre del compuesto que venía en la hoja. Spoiler, lo tuvo que rescatar un ayudante. Veamos.
Well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol. During pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism.
Si no puedes leer el renglón, no puedes fijar la regla. Lo preocupante no es el trabalenguas, es la temeridad de convertir ese titubeo en política y como respaldo científico decidió apoyarse en RFK Jr. para introducir el mito de los Amish. Vamos con ese clip.
Because when you go from 20,000 to 10,000 and then you go to 12, you know there's something artificial. They're taking something. And by the way, I think I can say that there are certain groups of people that don't take vaccines and don't take any pills that have no autism. That have no autism. Does that tell you something? That's currently, is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are some studies that suggest that, yeah, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish, yeah, virtually. I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say. But you have certain groups. The Amish, as an example, they have essentially no autism.
Entonces, anécdotas elevadas a dogma. Ese es el atajo favorito para desarmar décadas de consenso sanitario y abrir la puerta a brotes de enfermedades prevenibles, justo lo que golpean primero las familias con menos recursos. Y cuando ese mismo estilo aterriza en el Senado, se desmorona. Para muestra, el intercambio donde Elizabeth Warren le pide coherencia a RFK Jr., veamos el siguiente clip.
You said, quote, if vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. No exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts. You would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. Then last week, you announced that the COVID-19 vaccine is no longer approved for healthy people under the age of 65. In announcing the change, you said the vaccine will be available for anyone who wants it. Now, obviously, both things cannot be true at the same moment. So let's clear this up right now, Secretary Kennedy. Will you tell America that all adults and all children over 6 months of age are eligible to get a COVID booster at their local pharmacy today?
Anybody can get the booster.
I'm sorry?
Anybody can get it, Senator.
Anybody. So you're saying that is now the official rule of HHS. Anybody is eligible to get a booster by just walking into the pharmacy.
It's not recommended for healthy people.
No. If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that in many states is that you can't walk into a pharmacy and get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost. As Senator Dr. Cassidy said, you are effectively denying people vaccines.
We're not going to recommend a product for which there's no clinical data for that indication. Is that what I should be doing?
What you should be doing is honoring your promise that you made when you were looking to get confirmed in this job.
You're going like this.
And that is, you promised that you would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. You just changed the classification of the COVID vaccine.
I'm not taking them away from people, Senator.
It takes it away if you can't get it from your pharmacist.
Well, most Americans are going to be able to get it from their pharmacy for free. Most Americans will be able to get it from their pharmacy for free.
The question is, everyone who wants it, that was your promise.
I know I didn't. I never promised that I was going to recommend products with which there is no indication.
When you said...
And I know you've taken $855,000 from pharmaceutical companies, Senator.
Did you hold up a big sign saying that you were lying when you said that? Because you are the one who said you would not take them away. Now, Senator Kennedy,
I'm not taking them away from anybody.
Secretary,
you want me to indicate a product for which there is no clinical data?
Senator,
is that what you want?
Secretary Kennedy, you said you wouldn't, and now you did.
I'm not taking them away. Everybody can get access to them.
No, they can't walk into a pharmacy the way they could last month and get access.
It depends on the state. It depends on the states.
A year ago,
but they can still get it. Everybody can get it. Everybody can get it, Senator.
So look.
Y ya por último, si cambias la etiqueta, cambias el acceso. No es semántica, es si tu farmacia te atiende o te deja en la puerta. Resumen de lo visto: un presidente que convierte el atril en consultorio improvisado, un experto que no sostiene su propia promesa y un público atrapado en consignas y trámites. Antes del cierre, dejemos claro qué está en juego y por qué no podemos normalizarlo. El episodio de hoy no fue un chiste de mal gusto, fue una sesión en vivo de cómo se fabrica la confusión. Se reemplazó evidencia para ocurrencias, lectura por improvisación y salud por propaganda. Así se vacía de contenido la política sanitaria y se llena de miedo la conversación pública. Exigir rigor no es elitismo, es proteger a quienes no pueden costear el error ajeno. Si el presidente insiste en gobernar a golpes de ocurrencia, la ciudadanía tiene que responder con datos, organización y una línea roja. La ciencia no se pisotea para salvar egos.
Donald Trump ha cambiado de postura sobre la guerra en Ucrania en cuestión de semanas. Esto sucedió de manera repentina y pública. No es un simple acto de justicia, no es un simple ajuste. Revela tanto la fragilidad de la orientación estratégica de la Casa Blanca como la eficacia de una táctica diplomática que supo leer los incentivos y las debilidades del presidente. Hoy, en Rumor de Estado, analizaremos cómo se produjo este giro, qué instrumento político empleó Volodymyr Zelensky para influir a Trump y cuáles son las consecuencias prácticas para la política de Estados Unidos. Un recordatorio rápido: si te está gustando lo que estás viendo, no olvides suscribirte, dar a like, comentar y compartir. El 98% de las personas que miran esto no están suscritos. Dicho esto, pasamos a video.
You say that President Putin has let you down. Have negotiations run out of road, and what are your next steps to compel an end to this war?
Well, he has let me down. I mean, he's killing many people, and he's losing more people than he's killing. I mean, frankly, the Russian soldiers are being killed at a higher rate than the Ukrainian soldiers. But, yeah, he said, let me down. I don't like to see. It's death. You know, it doesn't affect the United States. We have, other than unless you end up in a world war over this thing, you could. This was a thing that would have never happened had I been president. If I were president, it would have never happened. And it didn't happen for 4 years. People Most people agree it didn't happen, nor was it close to happening. And I spoke to President Putin about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye. I've said that many times. It was. But he would have never done what he did.
Esta declaración rompe con meses de ambigüedad y con episodios anteriores en lo que el presidente minimizaba con la responsabilidad rusa o el papel directo de Estados Unidos en el conflicto. Lo relevante aquí no es solo el contenido del mensaje, la admisión implícita de que Ucrania puede y debe recuperar territorio, sino el proceso político que lo produjo. Una negociación simbólica en la que Zelensky consiguió alinear la situación presidencial con los intereses ucranianos al menos por un momento.
Sanctions are directly levied on Russia, and there's very limited economic relationship between the United States and Russia. These next sanctions that we're talking about, that Congress is considering authorizing, are actually secondary sanctions, sanctions that would make it hard for Russia to continue to do business with countries like China and India, who are essentially funding the war. So this next set of sanctions could be much more impactful. The problem is, in the Senate, the Republican leader won't even bring up a vote, a debate on this bill, because Donald Trump doesn't even want a discussion about these sanctions because he's so worried that it might upset his great friend Vladimir Putin. What is most impactful and what will be most impactful on this war are more weapons for Ukraine. And here's where Putin has the upper hand. So long as Trump is still opposed to continuing to arm Ukraine, Putin knows that it is just a matter of time before he can gain the advantage. So Putin walks away from the summit with no economic sanctions, with no sense that Trump is going to continue to send weapons to Ukraine, and essentially a green light to continue the war on his.
Ese diagnóstico legislativo explica por qué la postura de Trump es políticamente significativa. Si la Casa Blanca respalda una estrategia que combine presión económica internacional con un suministro sostenido de armas, cambia la ecuación operativa sobre el terreno. Sin embargo, debemos distinguir entre declaración pública y política sostenida. El liderazgo estratégico exige convertir esas palabras en decisiones de política exterior, vínculos con aliados, autorización de exportaciones militares, coordinación de sanciones, y eso depende de múltiples factores institucionales que no se resuelven por una foto o publicación.
And they've proven that. Maybe it's it could be that Russia is a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week for nothing, So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago, and I'm glad you got it. But I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back. Yep. So we'll see how it all works out. And in the meantime.
La reacción de sorpresa no es accidental. Indica que el presidente en ese momento adoptó un tono alineado con la lógica defensiva de la alianza, pero debemos preguntarnos por la duración y la profundidad del cambio. ¿Se trata de una conversión estratégica o de un ajuste táctico incentivado por la interacción personal entre líderes? Las evidencias apuntan a lo segundo. Zelensky explotó elementos no estrictamente militares, apoyo moral internacional sobre una victoria posible, atención mediática que presionan a un presidente sensible a la imagen personal y la percepción pública.
It didn't just happen overnight. You know, so much of what has indeed overwhelmed people, not to mention just scared the stuff out of people, is what we are witnessing is a high-velocity event. Yeah. We are witnessing something that has been happening so rapidly, and it feels chaotic. But what I would offer you is what we are witnessing is the swift implementation of a plan that was decades in the making. Decades in the making. Project 2025 didn't just drop out of thin air. That's a product of decades of work.
Ese cierre de buena suerte a todos es ilustrativo. Mezcla una postura optimista con una distancia operacional en política exterior. Las palabras importan, pero las garantías concretas importan más. En política las palabras importan, pero las garantías concretas importan más. Financiamiento, envío de municiones, intercambio de inteligencia y coordinación logística. Si las futuras acciones no respaldan esto, la ventaja política pasará rápidamente de Zelensky a quienes critican la inconsistencia estadounidense. Y yo les pregunto a ustedes, ¿creen que este cambio será duradero o temporal? ¿Qué costo político estratégico puede tener para Estados Unidos al comprometerse más plenamente con Ucrania?
Después del show en la ONU, cualquiera pensaría que el presidente Donald Trump había agotado su cuota de insultar líderes mundiales. Pues no, hoy en el despacho Oval volvió a reventar el termómetro. Primero se lanzó contra la izquierda radical por un tiroteo en Texas y acto seguido apuntó al tablero internacional, incluido el presidente de Turquía, en una escena que solo puede describirse como colapso político en vivo. Vamos a poner orden en el caos y seguir el rastro de quiénes son sus blancos preferidos y por qué. Recordatorio rápido, si les gusta este tipo de videos, nos ayudaría mucho que le dieran al botón de me gusta, se suscribiera si aún no lo han hecho y comenten su opinión, ya que el 98% de quienes nos ven todavía no están suscritos. Juntos podemos hacer crecer esta comunidad. Ahora sí, pasemos con la noticia.
There was another shooting at an ICE facility in Texas yesterday.
Terrible.
Detainees were killed. The FBI director posted on social media bullets that were engraved with the message anti-ICE.
Right.
He just posted another thing on social media saying they recovered a handwritten note from the subject that read, "Hopefully this will give ICE agents real terror to think, is there a sniper with AP rounds on that roof?" Who do you hold responsible for the uptick in left-wing violence in the country?
Radical left rhetoric. The radical left is causing the problem. They're out of control. They're saying things, and they're really dumb people. I mean, I look at Crockett. I look at some of these people. They're very low IQ people, actually. But the radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them. I mean, bad things happen when they play these games. And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left. But the right's not doing this. They're not doing it, and they better not get them energized, because it won't be good for the left.
Cuando el presidente no tiene pruebas, fabrica un enemigo. Ni duelo por el detenido muerto, ni prudencia institucional, solo gasolina para encender trincheras. Y por si faltaba condimento, su aparato de pruebas lo encabezan figuras que ya han tenido que retractarse antes. Lo repito, en democracia no se reemplaza investigación con posteos autopromocionales. Ahora, del uso interno de la bronca pasamos a la vitrina global. Trump se permitió incluso tirarle una piedra a Putin.
But I'm very disappointed in Putin. And he's been fighting hard, he's been fighting long, and they lost millions, they lost like 1 million soldiers. And you know, with all of the heavy bombardment over the last 2 weeks, they've gained almost no land. Think of that. They've gained almost no land. And I'm not going to ever call anybody a paper tiger, but Russia spent millions and millions of dollars in bombs, missiles, ammunition, and lives, their lives, and they've gained virtually no land. I think it's time to stop, I really do.
No es una doctrina exterior, es despecho. No habla de víctimas, ni de estrategias, ni de aliados. Habla como si alguien al que dejaron en visto. Y cuando la política exterior depende del humor del día, el mundo se vuelve una sala de terapia improvisada. Pero lo más explosivo llegó cuando Erdogan sentaba a su lado, el presidente decidió ponerse sincero de más.
Of Turkey.
Unfairly, as it turns out, rigged election. You know, he knows about rigged elections better than anybody. But when I was in exile, we were still friends. That's always a good way to find out, test of friendship. But
el presidente de Estados Unidos insinúa trampas electorales frente al propio mandatario de un socio estratégico y lo hace con una sonrisa de complicidad. Eso no es un desliz, es una ventana a su idea de poder, admiración por quien manda sin frenos, y para tapar la onda expansiva de esa frase, llegó el comodín de siempre, el show contra James Comey.
we don't want that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, it seems like an indictment of James Comey is imminent. Would this be the first step in accountability for pushing the hoax of Russia, along with Barack Obama involved as well?
Well, I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General and Todd Blanche and Lindsay Halligan, who's a very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI. But I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. Thank you very much, everybody.
Cuando se avecinan revelaciones incómodas, el presidente cambia de canal. Si puede convertir a un exdirector del FBI en piñata, lo hará. Si puede presentar a una persecución personal como justicia, también. El libreto es transparente: distraer, disciplinar y dejar claro que quien no se le arrodille, paga.
All right, so as I just alluded to, and you've probably all seen, MSNBC was the first to break the news today that the Trump administration is officially preparing to indict former FBI Director James Comey. Now, in just a second, as I just mentioned with Chris, I'm going to talk to Preet Bharara. He's standing by. He's a longtime friend of Comey's, and he also, of course, succeeded him as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Now, to state the complete obvious, what we're all thinking, indicting the former director of the FBI in a transparent attempt to settle a political score is an absolutely brazen abuse of political power. It's also one that we kind of knew was coming. It doesn't make it any better, but we kind of knew it was coming. Because Trump has few political enemies he loathes more than James Comey. I mean, in some ways, his hatred of Comey, and I was thinking about this earlier, has always been a little ironic. I mean, given Comey's decision to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails just weeks before the 2016 election. Remember that? A development that pretty clearly had an impact on the outcome of that election. But that couldn't make up for the fact that just days into Trump's first term, Comey made it clear that he would not bow to Trump's demands for absolute loyalty. I mean, Comey repeatedly refused Trump's demand that he absolve Trump of any blame during the earliest days of the Russia investigation. And within months, Trump fired Comey specifically because of that investigation.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
The man always says the quiet part out loud, which is sort of a theme of part of what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, the next year, the New York Times reported that Trump actually tried to order his Justice Department to prosecute both James Comey and Hillary Clinton. But he didn't go through with it after members of his White House staff wrote him a memo, and here's part of what it said. The memo was warning that if he asked law enforcement to investigate his rivals, he could face a range of consequences, including possible impeachment. It almost seems a little quaint today to think about that kind of internal pushback from members of Trump's inner circle, doesn't it? I mean, that's not what we're looking at today. And we have long known that there wouldn't be those kind of checks on Trump's behavior in a second term. It was all part of the warning about a second Trump term. There wouldn't be anyone to control or attempt to control his worst impulses this time around. So James Comey has had every reason to believe this was coming and has likely been preparing for it since day one. I even spoke with him back in May about what kind of advice he would give to others who were being targeted. And here's what he said, which really stuck with me.
Two things I've learned to do with these kind of threats at the same time that seem contradictory. First, see it clearly, understand that there really is a threat. Second, don't let it overwhelm you. Don't give them that. Don't let it freak you out and dominate your life. Take prudent steps, but don't give it. The part of the roar of Trump is to freak out his victims, the people he targets. So don't give them that, but don't neglect the threat. Protect yourself.
Look, we don't know for sure what the charges against Comey will be. And MSNBC's Ken Delaney, who's breaking a lot of news lately, reports that they will likely center around rather flimsy accusations that Comey lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2020. So just in case that's it, let's just dismantle that for a moment. I mean, during that hearing, Republicans were questioning Comey about whether he authorized his deputy at the time, Andrew McCabe, to leak information to the Wall Street Journal. The alleged leak was about the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server in October of 2016. Something it's kind of hard to imagine Republicans were actually mad about. I mean, they were probably celebrating when they saw that story. But that aside, Comey told the senators he did not authorize that leak.
Hasta aquí hemos visto un carrusel de culpas sin evidencias, celos geopolíticos, guiños a caudillos y lawfare de bolsillo. Cerramos uniendo las piezas. Lo de hoy no fue un arrebato aislado, es la metodología del poder cuando se gobierna con ego y amenaza. Se agita la audiencia interna con fantasmas, se improvisa diplomacia según el rencor del día y se usa la justicia como palo para dar ejemplo. Con esa mezcla, el país se vuelve arena movediza, la verdad se reemplaza por eslogans y la seguridad por bravatas. Frente a eso, la tarea es simple y dura: exigir pruebas antes que titulares, política exterior con cabeza fría y un Estado de Derecho que no se arrodilla ante el capricho del presidente. Si el despacho oval se convierte en escenario, toca recordarle al elenco que la Constitución no es utilería.
El regreso de Jimmy Kimmel a la televisión no es solo una victoria simbólica contra la censura, sino también una demostración del choque entre el poder político y libertad de expresión en Estados Unidos. Lo que en apariencia parecía un castigo por un comentario ofensivo, en realidad revela un mecanismo mucho más peligroso: la utilización de instituciones y presiones regulatorias para intentar silenciar voces incómodas. Antes de pasar a video, queremos hacerte un recordatorio rápido. Si te está gustando lo que estás viendo, no olvides suscribirte, dar a like y comentar. El 98% de las personas no están suscritas. Dicho esto, pasamos a video.
Everyone, all the editorial boards of the nation's biggest paper, including the Wall Street Journal, that wrote Mr. Kimmel's words were only moderately offensive. We want to be clear that none of this justifies the right's resort to regulatory censorship. And the premise that Democrats are more concerned about Jimmy Kimmel than they were about the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk is completely unfounded. Democrats said all the right things that all of us felt about, that it was tragic, that violence, political violence, has no place in our society. And we were met with, this is your fault, and we are at war. There's been this move today to rewrite the story of how Jimmy Kimmel ended up being indefinitely suspended, to absolve Brendan Carr of his role in this and the government's larger role in it. But the timeline just doesn't add up. I've heard, well, read the Hollywood Reporter and read the Wall Street Journal on this. I looked through all of it, and the common denominator is that Brendan Carr said to Benny Johnson, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. And the affiliates, who were already freaking out about it for sure, decided then that they were going to pull it. And so ABC and Disney in general, Bob Iger, had no choice but to do it. There are some smart Republicans that are cautioning them to come back from this line. Ted Cruz, of all people, who's the chair of the Commerce Committee, which actually has oversight over the FCC, said what Carr said there is dangerous as hell. That's right out of a mafioso. When it's used to silence conservatives, we will regret it. We should denounce it. So I understand now we don't live in cancel culture. It's just consequence culture. And you think an eye for an eye is a good solution to everything. That's what I've seen pelted at me about this. Well, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. That is not a way to run a free society. And you can't just trample on the First Amendment because something...
La suspensión de Kimmel nunca fue producto de la audiencia ni de la opinión pública, sino de presiones directas vinculadas al presidente Donald Trump y a miembros de la Comisión Federal de Comunicaciones. Este caso es fundamental porque pone en evidencia cómo se manipula el discurso sobre la llamada cultura de la cancelación. No se trata de un fenómeno espontáneo, sino de un uso selectivo del poder político para controlar el debate político.
In the past, when Republicans spoke out against government censorship, and if that's the case, I will go back and revisit whether I could have been louder. But that does not mean that today Republicans are silent just in an effort to own the libs. If you didn't like cancel culture when you thought it was happening in prior administrations, you certainly can't look at what just happened in our country and accept that that is something we should live with and we should tolerate. So I want to make it clear, there's going to be a Democratic majority in just over a year. And to the FCC chairperson and anyone involved in these dirty deals, get a lawyer and save your records, because you're going to be in this room and you're going to be answering questions about the deals that you struck and who benefited and what the cost was to the American people.
En medios como Fox intentó construir un relato distinto, que Kimmel había sido suspendido por irrespetuoso con la memoria de una figura política conservadora. Sin embargo, los propios reportes periodísticos demostraron que la presión vino de arriba, con amenazas veladas hacia Disney y la ABC. E incluso voces republicanas reconocieron que ese tipo de advertencias cruzaban una línea peligrosa hacia la democracia. El verdadero problema no era lo que Kimmel dijo, quién se atrevió a decirlo y contra quién. El congresista Slawel lo expresó con claridad. No se puede denunciar con censura cuando afecta a la derecha y al mismo tiempo justificarla cuando proviene de un líder como Trump. El uso del Estado para intimidar a medios, ejecutivos o incluso opositores políticos es incompatible con el principio básico de la primera enmienda. Aquí no se trata de proteger sensibilidades, sino de imponer silencio.
I understand why he is coming back. He will probably read something that the lawyers wrote for him and act trite for a second. Some of us have been there. And then he will carry on and be the exact same Jimmy Kimmel that we're used to.
Reacción en Fox News, minimizando lo ocurrido y reduciéndolo a un tema de ego, muestra hasta qué punto algunos medios prefieren proteger la figura de Trump antes que defender a la libertad de expresión. Mientras tanto, la estrategia de Trump sigue un patrón conocido: amenazas, demandas masivas contra medios críticos y el intento constante de redefinir la verdad como un ataque personal. Se trata de una forma como censura política mucho más sofisticada que la caricatura de cultura cancelada que suelen denunciar.
Decided that he wants to shake down people as relates to the First Amendment because he has filed not one lawsuit, not two lawsuits, but he has filed numerous lawsuits. He filed a lawsuit against the New York Times. He filed one against the Wall Street Journal, against CBS, against ABC, against the Des Moines Register. He is doing all of this because he wants to quash any speech that is not appreciative or lauding him, which is pretty much anything that's factual. So let's talk a few facts about these January 6 felons that should still be incarcerated because they went through the process, but because they were doing things on his behalf, of course, he wanted to let them go. So they released more than 1,000 people who participated in the insurrection on this government, many of whom who had previous criminal records, like Mr. Theodore Mendenforth, who was convicted of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child, or Mr. Peter Schwartz, who had 38 prior convictions, including one where he beat his wife by repeatedly punching her and biting her. Trump also pardoned Mr. David Daniel, who was convicted of production and possession of child pornography. Trump also pardoned Mr. Daniel Ball, who, quote, threw an explosive device that detonated upon at least 25 officers during the Capitol riot. He also had a record for, quote, domestic violence by strangulation. I'm not done. Trump also pardoned Mr. Andrew Taki, who sent nudes to an undercover law enforcement officer who was posing as a 15-year-old girl. Mr. Casey Hopkins also received a pardon from Trump, and Mr. Hopkins was convicted of forcible rape. According to court records, he, quote, had forcible intercourse with the victim, choked her to the point of impairing her vision, banged her head into a wall, and urinated into the victim's mouth as he humiliated her. These are the people that he decided to release in the streets of D.C. So if anybody does need to clean up D.C., I would agree it is this man, because he is the one that is...
Los nombres y casos que se recordaron en el Congreso exponen otra contradicción. Mientras se intenta acallar voces críticas en televisión, se otorgaron perdones presidenciales a personas con historiales criminales graves. La paradoja es evidente. El poder se utilizó para proteger a aliados peligrosos y al mismo tiempo silenciar opositores incómodos. Lo que está en juego no es solo un programa nocturno, sino la capacidad de una sociedad para mantener un debate libre frente a líderes que ven la crítica como una amenaza personal. Y yo les pregunto a ustedes, ¿creen que este episodio confirma que la censura en Estados Unidos ya no viene en la sociedad, sino directamente del poder político? ¿Qué opinan sobre... Donald Trump llegó a la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas buscando proyectar fuerza, pero el resultado fue exactamente el contrario. Un cúmulo de incidentes, algunos menores en apariencia, otros muchos más significativos. Dejó en evidencia la fragilidad política de un presidente que insiste en mostrarse como un líder imbatible, pero que termina revelando vulnerabilidades tanto en el plano doméstico como en la escena internacional. Un recordatorio rápido: si te está gustando lo que estás viendo, no olvides suscribirte, darle like, comentar y compartir. El 98% de las personas no está suscrita. Dicho esto, pasamos a video.
Was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work.
President Trump, what happened with Chuck Schumer? Are you going to push Zelensky for peace, President Trump? President Trump, Schumer.
Эскалатор не работает.
El episodio con la escalera mecánica detenida durante su llegada podría parecer anecdótico. Sin embargo, el hecho de que figuras cercanas a Trump exigieran investigaciones inmediatas refleja hasta qué punto su entorno vive en estado de victimización constante, donde cualquier contratiempo se interpreta como conspiración. Esto es una situación de persecución que se ha convertido en un recurso estratégico para mantener cohesionada a su base electoral, aun cuando se trate de incidentes triviales. Pero la verdadera tensión vino después. En su discurso y sobre todo en su interacción con el presidente ucraniano Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump dio un giro radical en su postura respecto a la guerra en Ucrania. Hasta hace pocas semanas abogaba por concesiones territoriales a Rusia como vía para poner fin al conflicto. Ahora, en cambio, sostiene que Moscú es un tigre de papel y que Ucrania está en condiciones de recuperar todo su territorio con apoyo occidental. Este viraje no es un simple matiz diplomático, es un cambio estratégico que revela dos cosas. Primero, la inconsistencia de la política de Trump, que fluctúa según presiones externas y estados emocionales más que por un plan sostenido. Segundo, la capacidad de Zelensky para aprovechar la inseguridad del presidente estadounidense y colocar el conflicto en un marco que lo obliga a distanciarse, al menos públicamente. No obstante, también llama la atención otro factor: la intervención de Melania Trump. En un discurso paralelo, la primera dama enfatizó la importancia de la niñez y de proteger su futuro frente a la violencia y la guerra. Aunque sus palabras no mencionaban directamente a Ucrania, el simbolismo resultó evidente. Trump ya había revelado en el pasado que su esposa le había escrito a Putin. El que hoy reaparezca este tema en la voz de Melania refuerza la hipótesis de que su influencia personal está pesando en las decisiones políticas del presidente.
Thank you for joining me today. We all have been in that moment of personal reflection, looking out over our city's lights, while time feels frozen. Behind each flickering light is a family at home, where parents work tirelessly to unlock brighter futures.
El problema no es solo que el mandatario ajuste su política por presión externa o familiar, sino que lo haga de manera más improvisada, sin un marco de coherencia estratégica, que la visión de la primera dama pueda tener más impacto que años de reportes de inteligencia y análisis militar, muestra la fragilidad de la toma de decisiones en la Casa Blanca. Y esa fragilidad, en un contexto global marcado por tensiones entre potencias, es un riesgo de primer orden.
A decision in the right direction. I think that part of where we are now in terms of thinking about what the fight is, it requires us, yes, to understand that we've got this administration and this president in front of us abusing the power that the people vested him with. But we also need to understand that this is bigger than Donald Trump. You know, part of what I write about, this stuff is decades in the making, Rachel. It didn't just happen overnight. You know, so much of what has indeed overwhelmed people, not to mention just scared the stuff out of people, is what we are witnessing is a high velocity event. Yeah. We are witnessing something that has been happening so rapidly and it feels chaotic. But what I would offer you is what we are witnessing is the swift implementation of a plan that was decades in the making. Decades in the making. Project 2025 didn't just drop out of thin air. That's a product of decades of work. Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation. Understand that the implementation of a plan that's about trying to get rid of the Department of Education, deregulate industries, weaken the rule of law by over a period of time, creating a system and through gerrymandering states so that we would now have the Supreme Court that we have. This stuff didn't happen overnight. And it did not happen just because of an election in 2024 or even 2016. So when we talk about where the fight must go, there is the aspect of it that is about the immediate moment, such as the weight of the federal government being used to silence critics, citizens, and it must be about understanding that this did not just happen overnight, and we have to pay attention to an agenda that is not going to necessarily go away when this guy is finally termed out of office.
Well, let me ask you on that gerrymandering front. The White House has been very aggressive, pushing Republican-led states to gerrymander their maps to effectively give Republicans a major edge heading into the midterms next year. That has led to related responsive Democratic efforts, including in your home state of California. Do you support Democrats' effort to kind of fight fire with fire there? Will you be involved in that California measure, for example?
I absolutely support it. You mentioned Gavin earlier. By the way, Gavin has a great sense of humor.
Más allá de las anécdotas, escaleras mecánicas detenidas, discursos de tono emotivo, lo que quedó expuesto en la ONU es una presidencia atrapada entre la imagen de fuerza que intenta proyectar y las humillaciones cotidianas que terminan debilitando su credibilidad emocional. La pregunta es, ¿qué significa este viraje para el futuro inmediato en la guerra de Ucrania? Y sobre todo, para la relación de Estados Unidos con Rusia, ¿estamos ante un cambio real con la política de Trump o se trata solo de una reacción momentánea a factores emocionales y presiones circunstanciales? Y yo te pregunto a ti, ¿creen que este cambio de postura de Trump hacia Rusia y Ucrania es duradero o solo será temporal? ¿Qué peso creen que tiene la influencia de Melania en las decisiones políticas de la Casa Blanca? En el escenario político estadounidense, la línea que divide el debate serio de la manipulación mediática es cada vez más delgada. Lo ocurrido recientemente con Jesse Waters, presentador estrella de Fox News, no solo muestra irresponsabilidad periodística, es un recordatorio de cómo ciertos actores mediáticos han optado por convertir la desinformación en espectáculo. Un recordatorio rápido. Si te está gustando lo que estás viendo, no olvides suscribirte, dar a like, comentar y compartir. El 98% de las personas no están suscritas. Dicho esto, pasamos a video.
Going on with the escalator. What do you think?
Yeah, they sabotaged them.
Yeah.
And they could have hurt the First Lady.
Yeah.
Trump would have fallen and he would have gotten back up. But, you know,
they would have blamed it on his rhetoric.
And then they sabotaged the teleprompter.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an insurrection. And what we need to do is either leave the UN or we need to bomb it. It is in New York, though, right?
Yeah,
there could be some fallout there.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Maybe gas it?
No.
Let's not do that.
Don't gas it. Okay. But we need to destroy it. Maybe just, can we demolish the building?
We could turn it
Have
into-
everybody leave and then we'll demolish the building?
We could turn it into affordable housing.
Okay.
That's what you do, affordable housing.
No, I don't like that. I like nice sky rises, Dana, the expensive condominiums. You
trying to
see
win an
the
election
Eastern
here.
River from there. No, this is absolutely unacceptable, and I hope they get to the bottom of it, and I hope they really injure emotional.
Waters volvió a utilizar su espacio en horario estelar para difundir teorías falsas y alimentar la idea de que cualquier contratiempo que involucre a Donald Trump forma parte de una conspiración en su contra. Esta vez, un simple incidente con una escalera mecánica durante la Asamblea General de la ONU fue presentada como un supuesto ataque contra el presidente. Lo preocupante no es el hecho en sí, sino un error técnico causado por alguien de su propio equipo. La situación fabricada después, la idea de sabotaje, de conspiración e incluso de guerra, cuando un presentador televisivo transforma un accidente trivial en un motivo para sugerir violencia contra organismos internacionales, estamos frente a un fenómeno peligroso, la normalización del extremismo en medios de comunicación.
President Trump. Schumer.
Mientras tanto, Donald Trump intentaba proyectar fuerzas en la ONU, pero lo que se evidenció fue fragilidad. La política del presidente sigue marcada por intereses personales, apoyos condicionados, giros repentinos en sus posturas sobre Ucrania y la OTAN, todo en función de agravios individuales más que de un cálculo estratégico nacional. Cuando un líder ajusta su posición internacional porque se siente ignorado por otro mandatario, no hablamos de diplomacia, hablamos de vulnerabilidad.
President Trump has indicated that any sort of peace deal, if it comes, with Ukraine and Russia, would end up with Ukraine losing some territory to Russia. Have you accepted that reality, or what concessions do you think, if you got to a negotiating table, you're willing to make?
First of all, it's important that today we had good conversation with President Trump, and I think he understands for today that we can't just swap territories. It's not fair. It's not real.
So you think his position has changed?
Yes, I think so. And God bless it. I really count on this, on continuation of his attitude to the territorial question and the question of our sovereignty at the end of the days. And I think that it's not about territories, it's about the position of Putin. He will continue. If we will give them more that he really wants, he will continue. So the question how to stop the war is just to stop Putin's ambitions, to change his position to this war.
Las palabras de Zelensky dejan claro que en Ucrania no puede aceptarse de territorios a Rusia y que en cualquier intento de negociación debe pasar frente a la ambición expansionista de Putin. En contraste, Trump oscila entre el oportunismo y la necesidad de mostrarse fuerte ante una base política que consume titulares simplificados. Esta incoherencia es amplificada y protegida por figuras mediáticas como Waters, que buscan desplazar la atención hacia conspiraciones ficticias en lugar de enfrentar los hechos. La cobertura de Fox News en este episodio confirma una tendencia. En lugar de analizar los problemas de fondo, desde la política hasta la manipulación del aparato estatal para fines personales, se prioriza el espectáculo. Un presentador capaz de bombardear o destruir la sede de Naciones Unidas, aún en tono aparente de broma, está cruzando un límite que contribuye a erosionar la credibilidad institucional y fomentar un clima de violencia política.
The reality is that Chicago isn't even in the top 25 cities in terms of violent crime rates. So he's attacking Chicago because he doesn't like that people in Chicago don't vote for Donald Trump. They don't support Donald Trump. He doesn't like the governor, me, because I don't support Donald Trump, and I think he's wrong for the United States.
And he talks about coming into Chicago.
Yeah, as you know, he's been threatening to bring troops into American cities and into Chicago. The reality is we honestly are fighting crime on the ground with civilian law enforcement. That's how it needs to get done. And I've asked the president for help. FBI, ATF, DEA. We want to fight drugs and gangs and guns on the streets of Chicago. And we've done a good job of it over the last 4 years. We've cut the homicide rate in half. All of the violent crime rates for the city of Chicago have gone down by double digits. But we want more help. He's not offering that. Instead, he's offering troops who are not trained to do law enforcement. They don't know how to do arrests. They're really not appropriate for an American city. And frankly, this is part of a broader effort on his part to impose his authoritarian rule on big cities across the United States.
And that's what you call it, authoritarian rule?
It is.
How would you describe it as authoritarian rule?
Well, one after another. Look at everything that he's been about as president. Just recently, trying to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air by having his FCC chair threaten stations with taking away their licenses. Donald Trump has very often talked about bringing troops not just into cities, but anywhere where he sees an opponent that he thinks he should come after. Much of his rhetoric, as we've seen in his speeches, even last night during the Charlie Kirk Memorial, he talked about the fact that although Charlie Kirk didn't hate his opponents, that Donald Trump does, and that he harbors ill will toward them continually. This is a person who thinks that his personal will should be imposed upon the United States. That's not how it works. He wants his Justice Department to go after his opponents. We've seen that over and over again. And indeed, I believe yesterday we saw news that he is planning to do that, accidentally publishing what would have been a private communication with Pam Bondi.
There's been some suggestions that you might be considering a run for president in 2028. Is that true?
I always appreciate that people have mentioned this and have encouraged me to do something like that. But to be honest, I'm running for re-election as governor of Illinois. I'm focused on what's best for Illinois. And whatever decisions I make in the future will always have that in mind.
What do you think it would take to run against Donald Trump? When you think about it, you think about someone else doing it that you know, maybe another governor or you. what will be all the different considerations you would make in that decision?
Well, I would actually focus you on the bench that exists for Democrats.
What's the bench?
Boy, we've got a whole lot of really great people, governors and senators, who could be president of the United States and certainly will consider running. And I think the characteristics that are required are you got to have somebody who understands what it's going to take to rebuild this country after Donald Trump has torn down so many of the institutions that have been so important to democracy over all these years. You've got to have somebody who understands how to actually create affordability for working people, who's done it either as a legislator or as a governor, and who demonstrates the empathy that I think is so important to have if you're going to serve in very high office. I think thinking about what's good for the most vulnerable people in our country and how we're going to lift them up, how we're going to make...
La crítica de gobernadores y líderes locales subrayan el riesgo de un liderazgo autoritario, un presidente que busca desplegar tropas en ciudades que no le apoyan, que intenta censurar a voces críticas durante presiones regulatorias y que concibe la política como un campo de venganza personal. Frente a esto, la respuesta de ciertos sectores mediáticos no es fiscalizar ni preguntar, sino blindar al presidente con nuevas situaciones. Y ahora yo les pregunto a ustedes, ¿creen que la influencia de los medios como Fox News ha normalizado un discurso de odio en la política estadounidense? ¿Puede un líder actuar por agravios personales ser confiable en asuntos internacionales tan delicados como Ucrania? El nombre de Donald Trump aparece en los archivos de Jeffrey Epstein. Esto ya no es un rumor, es un hecho imposible de negar. Pero aquí está lo verdaderamente explosivo. No solo hablamos de Trump, también hay un apellido muy familiar, Melania, y las nuevas revelaciones sobre su pasado con Epstein que podría explicar por qué la Casa Blanca está en modo pánico. Un recordatorio rápido. Si les gusta este tipo de videos, nos ayudarían mucho que les dieran al botón de me gusta. Suscríbanse si aún no lo han hecho y comenten su opinión. El 98% de quienes nos ven todavía no están suscritos y juntos podemos crecer esta comunidad. Ahora sí, pasemos con la noticia.
Epstein files and documents from the Epstein estate, and some of the names are going to surprise you. Now, in this actual batch, we've got flight logs, we've got financial records, we've got information about Epstein that goes back 30 years that we just received. The files show evidence of scheduled meetings with Peter Thiel and Steve Bannon, as well as a pending trip by Elon Musk to Epstein's infamous island. Did he go? That question needs to be asked. We also know other folks are listed as passengers, including Prince Andrew. And the more files we get, the more we realize how vast Epstein's network really was. It spanned the globe, reaching high places and powerful people. And like I've said before, I don't care how much money you have, how powerful you are, or if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you harm the women and girls, you deserve to be exposed, and we have to get justice for the survivors. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has the power right now to release all of the files. We need them released.
Lo que escuchamos es solo la punta del iceberg. La lista de los contactos, viajes y pagos de Epstein es un mapa de poder en Estados Unidos. Y entre tanto millonario, príncipe y magnate tecnológico, aparece la sombra de Trump. Lo interesante es cómo la Casa Blanca está maniobrando para frenar el acceso a ciertos nombres. ¿Por qué tanto interés en ocultarlos? Muy simple. Si tiras de este hilo, no solo se cae la careta de Trump, se derrumba todo un círculo de aliados. Y ojo, porque lo de Melania no es un chisme barato. Es una documentación oficial.
Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files? Yes or no?
Why don't you try spelling it out?
Yes
if you're gonna
or
mock
no, Director?
Use the alphabet.
Yes or no?
No? A, B, C,
Director,
D, E, F?
it sounds like you don't want to tell us. Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name was in the Epstein files?
Why don't you try serving your
Director,
constituency
did
by
you tell the
focusing on
Attorney
reducing
General
violent
that Donald
crime in this
Trump's name-
country and the number of pedophiles that
Director,
are legally
reclaiming my
harbored in
time,
your
Director.
sanctuary cities in
Director,
California?
reclaiming
I'll
my
work with
time.
you on that. Do
Regular
you
order,
wanna
Mr.
work with
Chairman.
us on that?
Director, reclaiming
I
my
belong
time.
to the gentleman from California.
Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files?
The question has been asked and answered.
You've not answered it, and we will take your evasiveness as a consciousness of guilt.
¿Lo ven? Ni siquiera puede dar una respuesta directa sin tartamudear. El temor es evidente. Y aquí hay un detalle que nadie quiere tocar. No se trata solo de Donald Trump. Melania aparece en estas conexiones. Fotos, registros de fiestas en Mar-a-Lago con Epstein y el príncipe Andrés. Pagos documentados que coinciden con esos encuentros. Todo encaja con algo que Trump ha intentado vender como un simple conocido. Pero resulta que era mucho más y que su esposa formaba parte del mismo círculo. Esto explica mucho sobre la estrategia actual de Melania, mantenerse lejos y no aparecer en campaña. Desaparecer de la escena pública no es solo frialdad con Trump, es miedo a que se destape un pasado que los une a ambos con Epstein. Y mientras tanto, Trump lo único que sabe hacer es atacar a sus rivales, desviar la atención, fabricar enemigos, pero cada documento que sale, cada foto que reaparece, lo hunde aún más.
In terms of this regime trying to criminalize dissent.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I want the American people to know that when you stand up to a bully, you win. Do not back down. Do not bend. You allow them to go and wage their threats. If everybody starts to bend, for sure what is left of our democracy will be gone. And unfortunately, that is exactly what he wants. And even more sadly, is that many of his followers agree with this. And I am thinking to myself, how is it that you can call yourself American or patriotic when you literally don't understand who we are as Americans, when you literally are okay with throwing out the Constitution, when you're okay with someone just deciding, you know what, this is the end result that I'm seeking, and so just figure out how to get there versus doing what you are supposed to do. And I am so appalled at those that took an oath, at those that actually went to law school. Many of us ended up with law school debt. And then we have to take not only the bar exam, but we have an ethics exam that we have to take, because there is supposed to be some level of ethics in what we do when we go into a courtroom. Now you have people that literally either they just don't know the law or they just don't care. But the idea that you would go after someone, and listen, even as Democrats, we had our fair share of issues with James Comey, okay? But that's not a reason to prosecute someone. And so here's the deal. If he decides that he wants to continue down this path, I think that they're going to continue to lose. And I don't see the former FBI director saying that he is going to just go ahead and say enter into a plea deal, or he's just going to take this line down. I think that this is someone who absolutely will fight this to the end.
Yeah, it's a good point. I should note that he has a defense attorney, Patrick Fitzgerald, former U.S. attorney, former special attorney, special counsel. He also successfully prosecuted Rod Blagojevich, other politicians as well. He was the one appointed by George W. Bush as a special counsel during the Scooter Libby investigation. Final thing to you is like the Jimmy Kimmel thing broke through in a way that maybe him going after, say, Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, didn't quite. Do you think this breaks through? Is this the kind of thing that people talk about on the grocery store?
If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I don't know. As someone who has traveled this country and talked to people on a very granular level, I think, you know, and I love Jimmy Kimmel. I do. I've done his show twice. But him having the notoriety and the popularity that he had was very helpful, right? Yeah. I do think that there are those of us that are always in the weeds, that we look at what happened to Lisa Cook, who won as well, that we look at this situation as with James Comey. I think that there were those that, you know, even when we talk about Colin Kaepernick, you know, one of the things that I've been trying to make sure that people understand is that Colin Kaepernick, that was our first inkling that this was going to be someone that would use his governmental powers to go after free speech. But we kind of shrugged it off. Either you agreed with what he was talking about or you didn't, and you let it go. And that's not what speech is supposed to be about. It's not whether or not you agree. It's whether or not you are able.
La congresista Crockett lo dijo con todas sus letras. Estamos frente a un presidente que usa el poder para amedrentar y tapar sus propios escándalos. El problema para Trump es que mientras intenta silenciar voces, sus secretos con Epstein siguen saliendo a la luz. Y en este caso ya no puede esconder detrás de la excusa de que solo la conocía de vista. Las fotos con Melania, los pagos, los registros de vuelo son pruebas que hablan solas. Y aquí está la verdadera amenaza para Trump. El pasado no se borra. Y cuando se combina con un presente autoritario, la conclusión es clara. No estamos frente a un político común con errores del pasado. Estamos frente a un presidente cuya relación con Epstein no solo lo compromete a él, también arrastra a su familia, y eso explica la desesperación actual. Usar el poder para tapar, distraer y atacar. Porque si la verdad completa se conoce, no queda nada de ese mito de outsider que Trump vendió durante años. Si el complejo de víctima permanente de MAGA cada vez se acentúa más, se hacen los ofendidos, los perseguidos, los mártires, mientras ellos mismos alimentan la violencia política con discursos llenos de odio en cada mitin. Y Donald Trump, actual presidente de Estados Unidos, se da el lujo de publicar fotos fantasiosas de tropas invadiendo Chicago, mientras su corte de propagandistas, como Jesse Waters, llama abiertamente a la guerra. La hipocresía no tiene límites, y pocos la encarnan tan bien como Stephen Miller, ese operador que finge denunciar al Estado profundo mientras actúa como presidente en la sombra. Pero hoy tenemos una noticia. Gavin Newsom acaba de darle un golpe directo a ese gobierno de la sombra, de Miller y de paso al de Trump. Hoy en Rumor de Estado les vamos a contar esto. Un recordatorio rápido: si te gusta este tipo de videos, nos ayudaría mucho que le dieras al botón de me gusta. Suscríbete si aún no lo has hecho, comenta tu opinión. El 98% de quienes nos ven todavía no están suscritos y juntos podemos hacer crecer esta comunidad. Ahora sí, pasemos a noticias.
Yeah, I'm pretty tired of conservatives gaslighting about the current political environment and Donald Trump's rhetoric when all of this escalation can be traced back to his entrance into American politics. His claim to fame was saying that Obama wasn't born in America. He was the first presidential candidate to have his crowd chant, "Lock her up," about a political opponent. You can bring up the insurrection. Even in the past few weeks, my home city of Chicago, he posted a photo of Chicago being invaded by the Department of War. So the broader point here is Donald Trump endlessly deflects and tries to blame it on the other side when he is the one responsible for amping up the tension in America. And I've spent all of my formative years throughout high school, throughout college, looking to the president, who I'm supposed to be able to look up to, and seeing somebody who's trying to place blame on the left, who's amping up the rhetoric constantly. And yeah, it's not good.
So you think it's Donald Trump's fault that a deranged leftist climbed up to the top of a building and shot up the ICE facility, not once now, but twice in Texas?
I think it's Donald Trump's fault that America has gotten to this heated place. I think that
no responsibility for the radicalization on the left that's causing this violent outburst.
That 29-year-old is radicalized by online communities and online algorithms. I'm not going to blame that directly on Trump, but he was caught in a lot of online video game algorithms and all these communities. Donald Trump,
but it's Trump's
10
fault.
years ago,
Adam tiene toda la razón. Es un brillante desmontando, una a una, las tonterías de MAGA en directo. Pero aquí hay algo más profundo. La derecha trumpista jamás hace autocrítica sobre la violencia política cuando no les conviene. Trump ejerce violencia política cada día. Aunque no sea con pistolas, bombardea barcos en aguas internacionales sin autorización. Envía dinero a gobiernos que cometen crímenes de guerra y separa familias con sus operativos masivos. Y en este último frente, Gavin Newsom acaba de golpear donde más duele. Stephen Miller está desquiciado porque la fachada de su poder paralelo se está resquebrajando.
And what did the administration do? What did Stephen Miller do? What did Donald Trump do? They sent masked men to intimidate folks from walking in to that event. Masked men. Poor soul that happened to be in the area. Delivery guy delivering strawberries was detained because he just happened to be in the area. Collateral damage. Disappeared. These masked men had no identification. These masked men did not provide any information, name, badge number. Hidden from accountability, any transparency, any oversight. That's Trump's America, but it is not the America we've...
Esto es exactamente lo que llevamos advirtiendo. Un gobierno que normaliza operativos clandestinos, desapariciones temporales y justicia sin supervisión. No es algo exagerado. Para las comunidades negras y latinas ya es una realidad cotidiana. Por eso es tan importante que Newsom le ponga nombre y apellido a los responsables. Y ojo, si hoy lo hace un gobernador, el próximo presidente demócrata tendrá que gobernar con firmeza, con verdadera rendición de cuentas para desmantelar este autoritarismo. MAGA solo se entiende de fuerza y de límites claros.
This prosecution of James Comey, do you think is about actually seeking a conviction? How much is simply to inconvenience him, sending a message, force him to spend time and money on attorneys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'd love to get a conviction, but this is all about the inconvenience. This is all about intimidation. You know, the message, you think about how Donald Trump has operated his whole life. I mean, I like to remind people the Republican Party used to be the party that campaigned against frivolous lawsuits. And now the president, you know, basically is a practitioner of frivolous lawsuits and lawfare. And that's exactly what it is. So he He knows that James Comey is going to have to spend money. He's going to be inconvenienced. It's damage to the reputation potentially, and that's all that matters. And it's a message he is sending to anybody else that this could happen to you too. So what ends up happening? People go quiet. You see, corporations that go quiet or salute and get along, and so it's. I guess look, it's successful, but in the long run, I think it's going to be very much a stain on our history when we look back at how this was done.
You served on the January 6th committee, obviously. How do you prepare for the possibility the president could target you, others for prosecution?
Yeah, I have absolutely no worry about it because, first off, what I did was my constitutional duty, and I would argue that I embarrassed him because we showed that he was complicit or launching the overthrow of the government, the attempted overthrow. But any retribution would just be based on he was embarrassed, he feels bad, and he wants to. But there's literally nothing he can do. And if he makes the decision to do that, and they make up some charges, it'll just make me even more effective at pushing.
Ahí lo tienen, Trump y Miller transformando las demandas frívolas, que antes el Partido Republicano criticaba, en un arma para intimidar y desgastar. Mientras ellos montan espectáculos de victimismo, acusan de incitar violencia a Newsom por decir en televisión lo que todo el mundo ve. Esta administración actúa como un régimen autoritario. La respuesta de Newsom llama fascista a Miller. Esto es fuerte, pero es preciso, porque es lo que quieren mostrar. Son operadores del poder que quieren someter a todos mientras se hacen las víctimas cuando se les señala. El complejo de víctima de MAGA no es anécdota, es su estrategia. Acusan a otros de incitar violencia mientras normalizan la brutalidad, las desapariciones temporales y la intimidad judicial. Gavin Newsom no les dio el gusto esta vez, les respondió con la misma claridad con la que deberíamos responder todos. Lo que se viene no es menor. Si la oposición demócrata quiere recuperar el terreno perdido, tendrá que hacerlo con coraje, con políticas que desmantelen esos mecanismos autoritarios y con la valentía de llamar al fascismo, porque si no, la normalidad será cada vez más parecida a esto que vemos hoy. Donald Trump creyó que podía enterrar su escándalo con Jeffrey Epstein como si fuera un mal recuerdo, que bastaba con un par de trucos legales y con su maquinaria de propaganda para que todo desapareciera, pero cometió un error de principiante, rodearse de incompetentes. Y gracias a estas torpezas, hoy los demócratas en el Comité de Supervisión de la Cámara no solo siguen acumulando victorias, sino que han expuesto las conexiones de Trump con Epstein y hasta los movimientos turbios de los abogados que compartían. Un recordatorio rápido: si les gusta este tipo de videos, nos ayudaría mucho que le dieran el botón de me gusta. Suscríbanse si aún no lo han hecho y comenten su opinión. El 98% de quienes nos ven todavía no están suscritos y juntos podemos hacer crecer esta comunidad. Ahora sí, pasemos a noticias.
It's concerning to have a potential pedophile as a president. That is concerning, right? But this is like even bigger than him. I want people to understand the information that we were given about foreign governments and their participation, the information we were given about our own federal government and how high of a level we're talking about as far as like them being in cahoots. We know that JP Morgan Chase ended up paying out a large settlement because they basically kind of looked the other way as there were these ridiculous wire transfers that were going by. We know that there were fake corporations that were set up. We know that, or at least we've been told that there were fake immigration documents that were put together so that women from other countries could end up over here. We know that there were allegedly fake marriages. This goes and it reeks through every single level of government. And it's one of those reasons that these survivors have been quiet for so long, right? Because literally they would walk in and they would see these pictures of Epstein with all of these powerful people from all over the world. And then he would threaten them and say, if you say anything, just know I know everybody, right? And so I think if we are going to prevent Epstein 2.0, or if Epstein 2.0 is taking place right now, I think it's important that we nip this in the bud right now and we learn what we did not know and we put some safeguards in place to prevent.
Crockett lo dice sin rodeos. Trump es grave, sí, pero el problema es mucho más grande. Lo que aterra a Trump no es solo su propio nombre de los archivos, sino la posibilidad de que sus cómplices hablen, porque cada nuevo documento del patrimonio de Epstein, no del FBI, no del Departamento de Justicia, sino del propio patrimonio, abre una grieta más. Y en esa grieta, por ejemplo, la famosa carta de felicitación de Trump para el cumpleaños número 50 de Epstein. ¿Quién manda cartas así a quien supuestamente apenas conocía? La red es imposible de negar. Epstein pagó más de 54 millones en honorarios legales. Solo a Alan, abogado de Trump en su primera situación y a la vez defensor de Epstein, le pagó $3 millones para garantizarle un acuerdo vergonzoso en 2008, y ahora sabemos que esa supuesta amistad legal iba más allá de los tribunales. Por eso Trump está desesperado con distracciones ridículas, como este post en su red social hablando de Amelia Earhart, la aviadora desaparecida hace casi un siglo. ¿Qué tiene que ver eso con Epstein? Nada. Pero Trump confía en que su base es tan manipulable que se entretienen con un hueso lanzado al aire. Y ahí está el insulto. Trump cree que sus seguidores son tan ingenuos que basta con una anécdota histórica para que olviden las conexiones de su presidente con un pedófilo convicto. Los trata como gatos persiguiendo un láser. Y lo peor es que él sabe que funciona.
He has appointed enough members of the Supreme Court to get away with everything, and that's essentially what's going on here. So you had Michael Horowitz, who is the special counsel, who said in his report, the overwhelming weight of that evidence supports Comey's version of the conversation. They also tried to go after Andy McCabe. They couldn't pull that off.
He never interviewed
I think that
Comey.
everybody
He never
should pay
interviewed him.
attention to what Andy McCarthy was saying this morning, and he has a piece up in the National Review. The indictment against Comey should be dismissed. He said to Maria Bartiromo, this indictment is not about the Russia investigation, which is what you want to make it seem like, but it's not at all. It's completely detached from that investigation, and it seems to be premised on something that's not true. I don't think there's a case. I love Ted, about Ted Cruz, but McCabe never said that Comey authorized it. This is about leaking to the press. Don't think that the case gets to trial. If you wanted to get dismissed, maybe for selective prosecution, look no further than the president's social media posts or what he's saying to those gaggles. And also, it makes no sense to me why Donald Trump doesn't like Jim Comey, because Comey delivered him.
Trump llama persecución política a todo lo que le incomoda. Pero lo que está haciendo contra James Comey es exactamente eso, persecución. No, lo que no logró con Merrick Garland en 4 años, Trump lo intenta usando el aparato estatal como martillo contra sus enemigos. Y mientras tanto, sigue ocultando lo único que realmente lo aterra, sus lazos con Epstein, y la posibilidad de que esa madeja siga desenredándose hasta exponerlo por completo. Hoy lo vemos con claridad. Trump no solo fue un amigo de Epstein, no solo compartió fiestas y vuelos, sino que utilizó los mismos abogados y fiscales que antes protegieron al depredador. Su estrategia ahora es infantil: distraer, insultar, culpar al Estado supuestamente profundo, pero cada nuevo documento que sale lo hunde más. La pregunta ya no es si Trump estuvo cerca de Epstein, sino cuánto más va a salir a la luz y cuántos de sus cómplices terminarán hablando. Si este análisis te resultó útil, suscríbete, deja tu like y comparte este video. Como dijimos al inicio, el 98% de quienes nos ven no están suscritos. Ayúdanos a crecer esta comunidad y llegar a los 1000 suscriptores. Nos vemos en el próximo Rumor de Estado.